Now we'll go to the third question, as the lights come back on and our fuses are restored. Are Tefillah and Teshuva dependent, page 5, are Tefillah and Teshuva dependent upon one another, or are they separate and independent endeavors? In other words, does Tefillah have an effect on the efficacy of Teshuva, and does Teshuva have an effect on the efficacy of Tefillah? Those are certainly major themes in Rosh Hashanah. So I wanted to first point to the end of Nisan HaTokef, which I mentioned earlier today, where it says, Tshuva, Tefillah, Tzedakah, Ma'avirin, Rag, Zera. Sounds like they're not the same. It sounds like these are two different dimensions in terms of a person's spiritual development. It's true, though, that they might have a certain kind of effect on one another. If Tefillah means reaching out to become closer to Hashem, well, then obviously, Tshuva should be easier if you are reaching out to come closer to Hashem. And if Tshuva means returning to Hashem, well, then Tefillah should be easier. Because, so it's not like they're apples and oranges, but they're still, not the exact same thing. At any rate, I wanted to compare this to a number of sources. For instance, the Gemara in Sanhedrin and Davav Amud Bet, which I always like this pretty short and to the point, source. Rabbi Bieler Omer, Haresh Gazal Sa'a Shel Chitim V'Tachna V'Afa V'Efrish Mimena Chala Ketzad Mevarech. Right, that if a person steals a certain amount of grain, and now he all of a sudden gets religion, and he wants to make a bracha on this thing that he stole, right? Ein zeh mevarech ela min ha'etz. Well, you can't make. Not only shouldn't you make a bracha, if you do, it's an abomination. Right? A person who's there are a number of ways the Gemara interprets this pasuk, but one way is by grabbing something illegally and then trying to make a bracha on it, it's an abomination to Hashem. So clearly, Tefillah can't take place in a context of evil. Whereas if, in fact, a person has done something that's wrong, it's like Tovel b'mikvah and sheretz b'yado. You're jumping into the mikvah, holding on to the source of impurity. So how can you engage in Tefillah when there is this other aspect to it? Now, granted, mitoch lo lishma ba'in lishma, and at least the person's doing something, and you can make all kinds of rationalizations, but if the person wishes to really understand what's going on here, don't do it. In other words, that you shouldn't do it in the first place. Like there's this joke about this person who was known as a thief, but he would always give tzedakah to a certain person, and every day we would go by this person, he gives tzedakah. One day, he comes up, the person grabs all the money and runs away. So he said, "Naman of shah, come on." So he said, "Well, tzedakah is tzedakah, and business is business." So he has to he makes a certain dichotomy. Well, that's wrong. You're not supposed to live that kind of compartmentalized life. You're supposed to be consistent. But going even further than that, Teshuva perhaps, let's start with Tefillah and Tzedakah. Tzedakah is certainly ben adam l'chaviro, right? So that's doing something for another person generally. Whereas Tefillah is usually ben adam l'makom. Tefillah is not really a community thing, even though it should be done in the tzibur. Teshuva, I would claim, is really both. It has a ben adam li'atzmo concerning both shemayim and chaviro. In other words, it's getting in touch with yourself vis-a-vis how you relate to others. I mentioned last night that I think that Teshuva is also what I would call a lava nitak laseh, meaning that you can only do Teshuva if you've first done an aveira. It's a positive commandment that is designed to undo something that you did negatively. And so that's the nature of these particular issues. But this dichotomy of dividing into three, ben adam l'makom, between man and God, ben adam l'atzmo, man and himself, ben adam l'chavero, has resonances in many different places. So for instance, Maran Bava Kama says, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Hayman de boy lemevi chasida. A person who wishes to be a pious person. That hopefully would be everyone's aspiration. L'kayim milad nezikin. So he says, be very careful about nezikin, meaning be careful about not damaging the property or the person of somebody else. That's very righteous, that's very pious. It's not only being good citizens, being a good person. Rava Amar milad de avos. Rava says, I think that the way to be a chassid is to be careful about Pirkei Avot. You should embody all of the things that it says in Pirkei Avot. If you can do that, wow, you're a very righteous person. The Amrila, and there's another version, Milei de Bracha. Oh, you want to be a chassid, be very particular about bracha. Always say the right bracha, always think about the brachot that are appropriate. And the Maharsha mentions that, there are gimel chalakim. In other words, you can divide life into three portions. Hainu tov lashamayim. One is your relationship with Kadosh Baruch Hu. Tov labriot. One is your relationship with other people. V'tov li'atzma. And what you do for yourself in terms of your own personal development. So and he divides it. Nezikin would be tov labriot, avoid damage and trouble to other people. So that shows that you care about them. Avo tov la'atzmo and bracho tov la'shamayim. The Maharani Prague sees this delineation in lots of different areas. So he likes the number 3 anyway. He's a bit of a mathematician, and so he felt that the number 3 has a certain symmetry to it. But it's interesting the number of 3s that we can think of. So you have Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Right? Avraham is considered the quintessential Baal Chesed, Gomei al Chasadim, Machnis Orchim, etc. Yitzchak is the Ola Tmima, is the Korban, right? Ben Adam Lamakom, and Yaakov is the Torah person that's considered Ben Adam La'atzmo in terms of self-development. You have also the idea of Al Shlosha Dvarim Ha'olam Omei, Al Torah, Al Avodah, Al Gmila Chasadim. Right? Gmila Chasadim, Ben Adam L'Chaverot, between man and man. Avodah, Ben Adam Lamakom. Torah, once again, as far as Ben Adam La'atzmo. Or there are 3 things that are Yarei V'al Yavor. There are 3 things that you absolutely should not transgress. Right? Shvichat Damim, it's the ultimate antisocial thing to do, to murder somebody. Avodah Zarah, that's the ultimate thing to get God upset, because you are being disloyal, unfaithful. And Gilei Arayot, that's considered a person not acting as a human being properly, but rather giving into his baser instincts. And so this sort of dichotomy is interesting, and therefore from the point of view of Teshuva and Tefillah, I think that Teshuva is more an umbrella idea of trying to fix all kinds of things. Tefillah has a very specific Ben Adam L'Makom dimension, and the Maharsha shouldn't be understood that these 3 people are arguing. They are reflecting 3 aspects of the same thing. Whereas if a person wishes to be a Chassid, he has to be careful about all 3 areas. He has to be careful about Ben Adam L'Atzmo, Ben Adam L'Makom, and Ben Adam L'Chavera.